Welcome to the 2021 AIA Austin Homes Tour. We'll be talking with David Weber and Ray Santana from Weber Studios Architects. I'd like to thank our sponsors. The title sponsor, Dalgleish, and the underwriters, Trey Morris Homes and Christy Nick. Oh, and the gold sponsor, Exclusive Windows and Doors of Austin. All right, I am Michael Bennett, and I'm an architect here in Austin. I work at Choco Design. I'm also the treasurer of the newly formed NOMA of Central Texas, and I also help start newly formed LGBTQIA+ Alliance within the AIA. Everyone will be having a question and answer session at the end, so please put your questions in the Q&A box. I'll monitor the chat also, but let's see. I wanted to say I'm a little extra excited to do this one because Ray was part of my year in the Leadership Collective, and then David is one of our sponsors for the LGBTQIA+ Alliance. So it makes me happy to be able to help you. So let me tell you a little more about them. With 24 years of shaping custom residential architecture, they enable clients to truly love where they live, as demonstrated by an impressive 15 AIA Homes tours. David Weber, founder and principal architect of the firm, is joined by Associate Senior Project Designer Ray Santana, who is also the incoming chair for the AIA Leadership Collective 2022, as well as a member of NOMA. Thank you both for being here. Take it away.
Thank you. Looks like we just need to do a little screen swapping here. So since
bear with us for a sec.
Since I was born in the last millennium, I'm going to let this guy help us figure that out.
All right.
Okay, looks like we're set, ready to go. Hello, everybody. We're looking forward to talking to you a little bit about the Clearview residence that we completed about a year and a half ago now. And before we get started, though, we want to send out another round of thank yous for the silver sponsors. We want to thank Builders First Source. Let me make sure I get this right. Oops, sorry. Bronze sponsors, Builders First Source, Anchor Ventana Glass. Our silver sponsors, Ferguson and McCoy's. And with this particularly big thank you to our gold level sponsors, Exclusive Windows and Doors. And particularly Trey Morris Custom Homes and Christina Hardwood Floorings for being our the tour underwriters, both of whom were involved with the Clearview residents with us. And then in addition to that great group of organizations, we want to thank our Homes Tour Shepherd, Kate Knoll, the Homes Tour Committee chairs, Molly Hubbs and Scott Harvey, for the work that they do, because this is such a big undertaking every year. And with a particularly strong thank you to Ingrid, Julia, Rob, Courtney, Bridget, and everyone at the AIA. And did I leave out a name there? And Anissa, sorry. She got covered up by our little tag there. Okay, before we get too much further into the whole presentation about Clearview, I'm gonna move ahead and I'm gonna show a little video about Weber Studio. And for anybody who's going to have a hard time hearing this, or if it's too quiet on your screen, make sure to turn up your volume on your Zoom so that you can hear everything. And here we go.
Hey everybody, I'm David Weber from Weber Studio Architects, and I have two of my favorite associates with me, Stefan Potter to the left and Ray Santana Linares to the right. And we're here to talk to you today about the Clearview project that we completed in 2017. A little before we get started talking about the Clearview project, I want to tell you a little bit about Weber Studio. We have a mission in our office to follow a consistent process and arrive at unique outcomes, which in our minds means that we're reinventing architectural beauty on every project, or trying to redefine what architecture can be on every project. Our consistent process is based in four fairly basic
We lost some sound.
David, you need to unmute yourself, please,
Architecture
or
that
we
is
can't hear the video.
unique to that client and that condition, and special in its own way. For each project, like I said, our intent is to redefine what architecture can be. And so one of the things we're most proud of is our portfolio projects are very widely in scale and scope, detail, finished materials, and in overall architectural concept. Our vision, a further extension of the mission that we work within every day, is about trying to create a world where architecture is both inevitable and yet unique. So enough about the firm. Let's talk to Stefan Bader and hear what he has to say about the client of our Clearview project.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stefan Bader, as David was saying. I've been with David for 8 years now, and we have a wide variety of clients. And this particular client was quite a wonderful and lovely individual who was looking to build his forever home. I don't want to speak about the house as a retirement house, but essentially, we'll be talking later. Ray will get into that detail when we talk about accessibility. That was a huge part what we had to solve on this project. But our client was he was challenging throughout the process, but very trusting and reasonable. Whenever any challenges came up, he kind of pushed us to resolve these problems as well as we could and beyond. But in the end, we always referred back to the designers, Jennifer Hartman as the interior designer and us with Purpose Studio as the architect, to help them resolve these problems to the best of our abilities. It was just such a great experience to go through this with this client and the whole team. We were just often we have really wonderful clients, but this one was in particular a special one, and we had a lot of fun going through the project.
Just to talk a little bit more about the project itself, starting with the site. So it's a remodeled addition of an existing house. The client had actually lived in the house for a number of years before we were brought on to the project. And there was a previous addition onto the house. So part of our, one of the main things we wanted to come in and do is take the existing house, keep what's really good about it, and actually keep the original house form, and then replace that existing addition with a new addition that actually works better for what the client trying to go for. As for the program, openness was one of the aspects. We wanted no steps on the main level, and that goes hand in hand with accessibility. So the master suite, the master is on the first level. Also, you'll see in the slides that the entry is get to the front door using a ramp. So very accessible for that main level of the house. Also going into the new terrace in the back for the pool and outdoor areas are also still on that same level. And then the functionality, we wanted low maintenance, so you'll see the exterior cladding, the minimal detailing. It's all for kind of a low maintenance house, and we wanted to max out the site. So it's a great site, compact but central to Austin, and we really wanted to just make the most out of it. As far as the vision goes, just design-wise, as we went into it, you'll see some past projects that we have worked on that our clients brought to us and have wanted to use as inspiration for this house, and you'll see those. And then just back to what David was talking about with our principles when we come to any design with the firm, functionalism is a big one. And in that, we want to hit energy efficiency. You'll notice the siding is high albedo. It works well in our region, minimizing heat gain to the house. Through the siding, we also created a rain screen, which is it's in its own way a ventilation system. Another design principle we want to hit is expressionism, and this really goes in keeping the original form of the house, and just to reinvent it, to modernize it, and just make it work a little bit better for what the client regionalism and minimalism are the last two of our design principles. You'll notice that there's no visible gutters on the house. The detailing is kept very minimal. Again, that goes back to low maintenance and just keeping it the design vision very clear and creating a peaceful natural space.
One thing that was pretty fun about the regionalism aspect that is easily missed on this house is that we reintroduced Austin's ubiquitous 257 pattern that you see in a lot of stone houses in the city, but instead of using them as a random ashlar pattern, we did them as courses of metal siding or proportionate 257 proportionate courses. It's a great way of sneaking in some of Austin's history and legacy or heritage into something that's quite modern. So now that you know a little bit about us, our client, and the project, let's go take a look.
All righty, so everybody heard a little bit about the project so far, but I'll kind of reintroduce it a tiny bit with a couple of photographs of the existing conditions. The photograph on the left that you see here is what the house looked like when we found it originally in its original condition. Very simple 2-story, but otherwise completely unoffensive Terrytown quasi neoclassical revival house. And there was really absolutely nothing wrong with it from the street. We thought it was proportioned well and works with the streetscape. So the idea was not necessarily to throw that away. And if anything, we wanted to maybe celebrate that or reinforce it. The image on the right, however, shows a little bit of the problem we were facing, because the addition that you see on the back was poorly built. You can see the 2-story original form of the house sneaking up behind it. But this addition, besides being not so well built, it was an entire step below the main level of the house, which created a bit of a tripping hazard. And then coming out the back sliding door of this, you can see we're several steps down into a deck into the backyard that was sort of this strange outpost of space and not a very wonderful space, which I think belies a lot of or talks about a lot of the issues that a lot of projects we work on grapple with, which is the fact that people have all this wonderful land, but they don't have a really great way to integrate it into their main living space. And so in this case, you can see it was a little bit of a lonely, not so exciting space in the back. And the goal was to allow the original house to remain to some degree and deal with this strange and uncomfortable connection to the backyard that just didn't invite any interaction. Again, another photograph of the addition and sort of kind of an unsafe and not very well considered stair and the existing driveway along the side of the property. So nothing too precious to save in the original back, but the original form of the 2-story house was certainly completely reasonable as a starting point. In terms of the client's program, having a house that he could live in for the long term, and a house that would engage the backyard and have more connection to the backyard space and just more openness in general, he had us look at a couple of our own projects. And this was a house that we did that was on the AIA Homes Tour in 2015. And our client really loved this house for a few key details. He really loved the 0 thresholds between inside and outside. He loved the materials palette. And in particular, you can see in these slides here, the immense openness, kind of seamlessness between inside and outside, which we achieved by having floor to ceiling glass and 0 threshold walkways. And he loved in particular how this house completely opened up to the pool terrace, which you see on the right here. Our issue, however, was that this house that was on the Homes Tour in 2015 started with a much, much larger lot with a lot more breadth across the back of the house to open up so easily. And our client site for the Clearview house was much narrower and much smaller. So we had to somehow pull off the same sort of openness that we could in a smaller lot, while also trying to create a lot of privacy and incorporate these sort of wonderful details, these zero thresholds between indoors and outdoors. So we really do create that relationship between all of his living spaces that makes the house feel bigger. Another house that our client wanted us to refer back to in our own body of work was another house that was on the Homes Tour in 2013. And our client really loved the metal siding on this house. And while this is a pre-finished metal on this house, it's kind of an off-white color. Again, the idea on this metal was to help throw heat away from the house to reduce its heat gain. We loved that concept, but we wanted our client to have something a little bit more durable for the long term even than this. And so this is the introduction of where we brought the metal siding in a new form in his house. This is where we started to look at the idea of reintroducing Austin's architectural heritage in modern ways. Again, the 257 is one of the most ubiquitous patterns you see around the city. And this was a project where we got to reintroduce it as a more modern element while still honoring the legacy of Austin's architecture. This next image is next slide is a pair of images that our client gave us, just illustrating his concept of how open he wanted us to be. These reinforce the things he had already been telling us about our own projects, but he really loved the idea of a lot of glass and a lot of height. This is a client who he was so interested in having height that he was actually thrilled to discover that the ceiling height in his main living room was taller than the house from the Homes Tour that we had done that he had admired so much. But this was all inspired by his own images that you see here. And again, his desire to have his house open up to the pool and pool terrace, illustrated in these images that he shared with us, and having a lot of privacy and a lot of verdant outdoor experiences were a really important part of the overall program. He would acknowledge he's not an architectural expert, but he did pull in some images of some details that he quite liked, both of which were really helpful for us as well to get a sense for details that we could incorporate in whatever design schemes that we brought in. And most notable that these are strong gestural forms with some boldness attached to them. But the thing that we also really loved is these long overhangs, which are a great thing for us to love in Texas, where we have such an intense amount of sunlight that we need to mitigate. So these were a batch of images and inspirations that our client gave us as we pursued the design process. And I'm going to hand it over to Ray to talk a little bit about our client's program and how we resolved it in the design process.
All right, and if Michael or Ingrid, if you can confirm for me if you guys can see this cursor, just so I know if I can point some things out on here for everybody.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to show you guys two different schemes we're calling Scheme A and Scheme B. And these are kind of stepping stones onto how we eventually got to the final plan, which David's going to kind of break down a little bit for you. But to start with this one, Scheme A, this was the first design that we showed the client, and we're looking at the first level. Now I want to point out a few things. So the portion that I'm circling now with the cursor, and it's actually showing a different flooring material. That's the footprint of the existing house that we really thought there was a lot of value in. We wanted to keep as much as we could. And so that was one of the main challenges on the design is let's take this house and just keep everything good about it. So this kitchen already kind of had this really broad flowing space that we wanted to maintain. The client entertains a lot, so we wanted this space to be flexible. So we thought that's great. We didn't do much to this. In the central part of the house, so this entry hallway, originally there was a staircase here, We kept the staircase there, but you'll see in a little bit what we did to that to try and enhance it a little bit more. And there was originally a powder room under that staircase, which we ended up moving, which you'll see in the final plan where we decided to put that. But a big thing to note on this one is that when you go from the existing house to the new addition part that we designed for this, again, this addition is replacing an older addition, which we basically got rid of completely because it wasn't built to a very high construction standard, and it just wasn't doing what the client needed it to do. So at that break line, you see a few steps here to where it clearly delineates the existing house from the new addition. And so you take a few steps down, you come into this new living room, and this entire back wall of the living room was to be glass with an operable sliding door. So that really makes this entire space, including the terrace, your living room. So it kind of doubles the size of that. And then once you're out here on the terrace, you take a few more steps down and you're down at grade and you can access the pool. And so an important thing is that the site is sloping from front to back quite a bit. So we always try to connect our projects to the grade as much as possible so that we don't end up with a big house that's kind of way up out of the hill once you get to the back of it. So that was kind of our first approach, but it does mean you have these different segments of the house that are broken up by steps. And you'll see how that becomes something we iterate on a little bit in the later designs as accessibility kind of started becoming more important to the client. It kind of happened through the process, and you'll see where we ended up. One more thing to note on this one that we thought worked really well, and we kind of used parts of it in the final design, is that we put this carport way back, almost touching the rear setback of the site. And this allowed us to have a flexible space that's either a carport for 2 cars, or if you just park one, there's a screen there, and on the other side of the screen, you could have a table, and it becomes an extension of the terrace. So it gives it a dual use. So we like that a lot, and we kept an element of that in the final design. This is the upstairs floor plan. And this one, we really, floor plan wise, we didn't do much to it. It's kind of maintained of what the original house was. Of course, we came in and just updated all the finishes, flooring, tile in the bathrooms, all that kind of stuff was updated. But it was already working pretty well. It has 2 guest bedrooms and then this kind of big guest suite up here. What we did add is above the extension, the new part of the house, we wanted to make even more use of the site, and we ended up putting a roof terrace up here, which gives access from the bedrooms out to their own kind of private terrace up here. Then it also has access from the stair landing if there's a party going on and we want guests to be able to go straight out there. So I think that's about everything on this scheme. I'm going to go to the next scheme, which is kind of the next step of development. This is the next plan that we showed the client. And you can see here, probably the most important thing is that between the old house and the new addition, there are no more steps. And that was done because it just became evident that we wanted to be able to show up at the front of the house, walk all the way through the house to the back terrace without having any steps. This is for age and place, just accessibility for guests. And we just ended up creating this flat plane for the entire house until you get out to the terrace. Now, the downside of doing that is that the steps that were once between the new and old get added to the back. So we suddenly have to go down further to get to the pool, which is at grade. And so that was a design challenge we had to deal with from here. But this was a step along the way of how we got to the final design. Go up to the second floor. Again, on this scheme, not much was done to the second floor. I will note that this one is where we introduced a pitched roof on the addition, which you'll see in the final images. But that limited the space for the roof terrace to be on this smaller flat portion of roof before we go up to the pitched roof. And the reason we ended up pitching the roof was to kind of funnel in light from the south. So you'll see we end up with almost a 12-foot tall ceiling at the south elevation that really gets light in deep into the house. And here is our final plan. I'll let David talk us through that.
So a couple of things that came up in the process of going through these first design rounds with the client, and this is one of the things that is always very interesting. We do a lot of work with clients to really identify the full scope of what they want to achieve early in the process, so that by the time we do our first round of designs, it comes as close to a fully fleshed out design as possible. But the previous two designs both had an element of or some amount of steps into the backyard. Again, our goal was to connect the entire house to its outdoor living space, but that meant creating a certain number of steps no matter what. And ultimately, our client realized that one of the things that was so critical to him was making this house as zero threshold and continuously, we call it accessible. That's not how he talks about it, but making it as continuously, universally reachable as every other part of the house. And so it's just to illustrate the point that very often the design process is used as a way to get clients to get clear in their own minds about what it is they're trying to achieve. And that's indeed what happened here. So as a result, what you can see is the original house was here in the footprint that you've seen previously. Again, the original kitchen, which was already so functional for our client, remained as is. And the powder room that was once here, as Ray pointed out, was gone, so that by the time you come right in the front door, you can see straight through to the back. And because this entire enlarged terrace is the same level as the main living space, that essentially makes the entire outdoor living space feel like it's one with the inside space, and it feels quite large. The other thing that our client realized as he went through the process is that he really wanted a much larger pool. So we put in the largest pool we could fit in this narrow lot, and we gave him an outdoor shower, which apparently he uses every single day, except I wonder if he used it during Winter Storm Uri, and a barbecue and a little changing area. And these help to provide privacy from the side, as a fence does over here. Now, as much as we love how this design came out, it reintroduced the issue of needing to get down to the backyard. So we created a small staircase here with the idea that this little garden below was just inherently not going to be as used, but our client ended up putting a little bocce court here and doing some wonderful vegetation. So it's kind of a nice garden to look down into from the pool, but therein lies the challenges that come with any design, is you gain some aspects, but some aspects have to get put secondary in priority. The other thing that's really interesting is no matter how hard we tried to get 2 parking spaces in, the width of 2 parking spaces was always going to take up so much width in the lot that it was encroaching on the living space. And so our client decided in the end that he was going to be quite comfortable with a tandem parking space, which is unique. Most clients wouldn't feel comfortable about that. And so that's what the final configuration is here. You can see this pod of laundry and mudroom and powder room are situated so that when you're in the inside, you can't see out to the cars, but the corner of the additions here and here, and even of the master bedroom, they're all glass corners, so we get a lot of natural light flooding in. And in the master suite itself, there's a carve out here, which is a reflection of our sidewall articulation that subchapter F requires. And in this case, we wanted to make this a sort of private little master bedroom, master suite garden, which is what you'll see in a couple of moments. And this next image shows how we put the details together to make the spaces work. Again, we really appreciated the original house form and felt no reason to sort of a little bit obliterate that. And it was a great way to introduce a new version of metal siding, which we find to be such a great value for almost every project. What I like about metal is it's reflective of Texas historical tradition. There's a lot of metal used in Texas. What I also like about it is it's one of the most durable materials, especially for its cost. It's got a very, very high content of recycled and recyclable material. And this is true of steel or aluminum. And what you're seeing here is mill finish aluminum. And what we like about mill finish aluminum in particular is that it doesn't corrode. While steel is quite strong, aluminum is actually stronger for its weight than steel. It doesn't corrode in our climate. And when we use it in a mill finish aluminum like this, it's literally reflective, and therefore it's got a higher than high albedo, which means reflectivity, which throws heat back away from the house that's collected. Now, the thing that's really unique about this application is that while we typically will do and enjoy doing metal siding on walls and do a metal roof, we actually brought this more reflective siding material, this aluminum, up over our roof in the same sort of siding application as we have on the walls. And that allows our roof to be as reflective as the walls. The second aspect of the siding and the roofing is that we did a rain screen application, which is essentially where you take your siding and you hold it away from your house ever so slightly, and it creates an air layer or a venting layer behind the siding. And what this does is it means that when it's raining hard, it's throwing rain away from the house, but the moisture that's inevitably going to get behind any siding is allowed to exist. And because there's that venting layer, it vents out before it ever touches the waterproofing. It also means the waterproofing is protected with a little bit of venting, and that's always a good thing as well. Around the windows, you can see with the photograph on the top right and the photograph on the left of the new result, we kept the windows where they were. And because the original house didn't have overhangs, we felt like it was really important to address keeping water away from the windows. And so we created a buck for each one of the window openings made of the same aluminum to help sort of pronounce those windows at the same time that we're protecting. What's really wonderful about the aluminum siding is that in different times of year, different light conditions, it both reflects the light and sort of blends in with the environment around it, whether it's a beautiful sky during a sunset or whether it's with vegetation adjacent to it. It's a really moody and lovely material at the same time that it's extremely hardworking and super functional. I spoke about the rain screen a moment ago, and here are a couple of details illustrating how we did that. So the rain screen on the walls is always an easier thing to accomplish. It's with a simple screed system, which a lot of different exterior siding materials use to be applied or installed on a wall. But it's on a roof where it becomes a lot more tricky and frankly, a little bit more less foolproof. So in this case, we essentially built battens that we waterproofed so that we could put nailers fastened into the side of the battens. And each of those nailers, which was a little metal angle, is what supported the siding going across. And what this did is it allowed us to avoid putting any penetrations up here through the horizontal roofing plane. And since a lot of people will say, gosh, well, why would you put fasteners through the siding or the waterproofing on the side? And the reality is that's what we do every single day with every project. You know, all architects do it. We're always fastening through our wall waterproofing, but with water being driven mostly by gravity, it's less of a concern than putting it on a horizontal surface. So this is really not very different than how the siding on your own house is probably installed here. The key is keeping it off of the horizontal plane. Again, this vented space in here allows any water to get through to be able to vent. And it also means that all the aluminum that's out here in this plane, or the aluminum that's out here and here and here, it essentially pre-shades your house, helping to reduce your heat gain on the house. So not only is it really cool and interesting, but it's literally cool and hardworking. And again, we talked about the bucks around the windows, and you can see here, for those that you can see the dimension on here, it's actually a little over a foot of length for that buck that's projecting out from the window. giving a lot of direct protection around the windows. And again, in the same finish as the roofing and the siding, allows you to see sort of the sculptural quality that we get by putting these two materials next to each other. And I'm going to let Ray keep going and talk about the interior.
Yeah, I'm going to walk through just a bunch of pretty pictures of the inside of the house, but I want to point out a couple little details that we're taking into account in the design, and it's worth noting, I think. So this first slide on the left-hand side is taken from the entryway, and the kitchen is on our right, and there's a sitting room on the left. You can see that we're still in the existing, what we kept of the existing house, but we just kind of refinished a lot of the interior. Things like a frameless glass window kind of just helps to keep everything minimal. The baseboard is quite simple, but again, it's just kind of stripping down everything until we get to what's great about this existing house, is what we were trying to do here. Just on the side of accessibility, we can talk about the zero threshold that was important to the client. Very simple things that we kind of do in every project is, you'll notice there's the handles in this house, it's all using levers as opposed to knobs. That's a tiny little detail that actually is more accessible. I'm not sure if there's any in this photo, but all light switches were kept at 36 inches, which is a little bit lower than usual. But we like to do that because it creates this nice datum line with our door levers and countertops, and it also is a more accessible detail. On the right side, we're looking back towards the staircase, which we mentioned. The stairs basically stayed put where they originally were, but it was really important to open up the risers so that we could have that visual connection to the back and also bring light into that entry space. And so there was originally a powder room underneath that stair, which we moved, and we'll show you where we put that in the interior photos in a second. But yes, so this was just an important thing to, we always want to try and avoid a dark hallway. And so you'll see how we did that upstairs as well. So this photo, we're now in the new addition part of the house, and we're looking at the living room, which has this glass wall that's about 12 feet tall, and it leads out onto the full terrace. And you'll see here where you see that gray frame is actually a sliding door that, once open, kind of extends this living space out onto the terrace and lets that entire space be one. So if our client's entertaining a lot of people over, he can just have that open and everything's nice and connected. The photo on the right is a little peek at where the powder room ended up. You'd see a door that's cracked open a bit, and that's just showing where we relocated that. Oh, and also before I go to the next one, just to note the ceiling in this room, it starts to slope up as we go back towards the terrace. And that's one thing I noted on the plans, that we're just trying to funnel the light into the house. So this photo on the right, on the left, is from the primary bedroom on the main level. And I kind of get a kick out of this door. So it's similar to the one we saw in the living room that's about 12 feet tall, but this one is only really for one person or two, whoever's in the primary bedroom. So I don't know if it's 2'8" or 3 feet wide.
I think it's 2'4" actually.
So 2'4" by 12 feet. I just love that. But that slides out of the way to give access out onto the full terrace. And then the photo on the right is looking into the primary bathroom on the main level. Again, this is where the bedroom used to be, and we made use of this space to give them a much larger bathroom. So you can see the freestanding tub we put in there. And this photo on the left is actually standing at the tub, looking at that sidewall articulation that David mentioned. So it's a code requirement, I think, on most single family City of Austin lots, that they just don't want this big long facade with no articulations in it. So it's often something that architects need to be able to design around and make use of. And here I think it worked out pretty great to bring light into this space and show off a nice sculpture the client
a happy side benefit is that from the bathtub, you actually have a view out to the backyard pool area, which is also reflected in the vanity mirror in the picture and photograph you saw just prior to this one, where in all cases, the client has an access and a view back to the outdoor living space that they wanted so much.
Definitely. And the photo on the right, just quickly, is of deeper into that same bathroom, but we're now looking into the shower, which, if need be in the future, could be used as a roll-in shower. Again, no threshold or curb put in on that one. These photos were going into the kitchen. We mentioned the kitchen kind of stayed as is, and it's a very flexible space. Say our client was entertaining lots of people, he could maybe even move this table out and use it however he needs to. So it's a big white kitchen. And I wanted to point out this fireplace, which is actually mobile, and it's a EcoSmart, which we love using on a lot of projects, but it's actually burns ethanol. And we like that for health reasons as well as environmental, and it's great that it's mobile. And then this last photo from the inside on the left is once we're up the stairs, we're looking at the stair landing. And again, this was trying to avoid a dark hallway. We put a sliding door that leads right out onto the roof terrace, which is on the right. And here we're looking back at kind of the original form of the original house that we kept. And so we're now standing on top of the new addition. And we're looking at just the access from the guest bedroom that leads out to this roof terrace, and the sliding door on the left, which is from the stair landing that leads out to the terrace. I think we're going to go back outside.
Just so you guys know, we're at 4:43 right now, and we do have a couple of questions. So just
That is perfectly great, because I think we're almost done, actually.
all right, perfect.
Because all I'm going to say is that our client loved it. So, and from even before we started the design process with him, he used to say, do you think I can get this house on the home store when it's done? And so we're really excited to say that the answer is yes. We're thrilled that we actually get to be on the home store, and our client is very happy about it too, because he's very proud of the house, as we are, and he really enjoys living there for all the reasons that he wanted to take on the project in the first place. It makes great use of a very small inner city site. It makes use of an existing house. It has this wonderful indoor-outdoor flow and a lot of glass along the back that opens up to a broad pool terrace. And it uses some of the details that he really loved in some of our other projects, the zero thresholds, the metal siding, and ultimately it gives him the really, besides those details, ultimately it gives him also the aging in place, just barrier-free home that he ultimately realized that he was wanting to end up with. And while it is a highly functional house, and we think it came out quite beautifully during the daytime with all the natural light. At nighttime, it's really just as magical. With all the glass on the back, you can see the warmth of the wood paneling on the inside, and all the natural light that all the light from inside that flows to the outside in the evening. And in the evening on the front with that new metal siding, it sort of blends in with the whatever magic the sky is providing for us, and blends in with the vegetation. And while it's a very bold addition to the neighborhood, it's also one of our more subtle in the way it just tries to reflect its immediate surroundings. All elements that we think really celebrate the very nature that we're trying to protect through a lot of the sustainable design decisions we bring into our projects. And that is it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We're so glad you're here.
And I should stop sharing, right, Michael?
Sure. Maybe we'll go back if people are asking specific questions.
Okay.
I'd like to tell you that I'm getting text from my mother, who is, so hold on, absolutely loving this house. I think she's more excited about this than anything I've ever showed her of mine.
Tell your mom hi.
All right, well. Now she's mad at me. That's fine.
Oh, I do want to. I know you're going to get into questions, Q&A, but I also, I mean, we have a list of many of the folks in our office that worked on this project, and I just want to give them all acknowledgement. No project can be done without all the folks that worked on it. And I'm not going to name them all because I'm afraid I'll leave somebody out, but but Stefan, who is the project manager, is out of town. He couldn't be here for today's discussion, unfortunately, but please look at the booklet for the AIA Homes Tour so you can see all the wonderful people that contributed to this project, including somebody who's in the session right now, Kevin. So thanks to all of them as well.
All right, well, hold on. All right, so what do we have? Am I getting some feedback? Something weird happening? No? Okay.
It does.
Okay, so there were 2 questions about the stairs. So people are asking some code questions here. So there's 2 questions about it. One is about how the stair balustrade passed code, and then the second one is about how you got those open risers.
The open risers, actually, that's a fairly easy thing to do, as long as, at least in our experience, we have not, it used to be that they didn't even require a 4-inch sphere to go through, to be blocked with an open riser. And more recently, the code interpretation has been that you can't have a 4-inch sphere go through the open riser. So these open risers, they're less than 4 inches, so it meets that requirement pretty easily. Now, on the balustrade, I'm assuming the question is about the balustrade that's not there, because the glass railing at the top of the stairs, that certainly meets code. That's a standard product that's available that meets code. And then the handrail coming down the stair obviously meets code. But when we were, we originally had designed a glass panel to go on the side of the stair because of that very reason. And every once in a while we have a client, and this one was one of those clients who said, gosh, well, we could do glass, but I don't really want to do glass. Can we just leave it open? And our answer was, well, no, not at all. You can't leave it open. It violates code. And, but every once in a while we have a client who will overrule. And so he asked his contractor to put up a panel. And ultimately it appeared that it came down one day. So that's one of those things, but we don't recommend that. It is a violation of code. Safety is very important. And usually for designs like that, we'll have a glass panel there.
Yeah.
So you still have the purpose. But thank you for asking that question. It's come up a couple times in the past, and it's important.
See, your entry door is amazing. It looks like there is minimal clearance above and below. How did you plan for movement in the house?
It has an automatic door bottom on the bottom of the door. So there's a slight gap in there, and automatic door bottoms allow for you to have a completely seamless threshold. And when they are closed up against the jamb, the automatic door bottom, which has a gasket, pushes down against the floor. So as long as you can bridge that gap, then you should be okay. But you're right, they really require very, very little movement in the house. And the same thing on the top. We don't have a door bottom on the top, but we have a little bit of a gap there. But I will tell you that's a real challenge. This house is not without movement, so that was something that we had to accommodate for, and it's just really, really tight. We had a good contractor that really pulled that off. So
That always helps.
yeah.
And there's 2, give me 1 second. There's 2 that are about sustainability. How much consideration was given to sustainability when you were picking your materials? And then what other sustainable measures were used? I think that's kind of the same as another question. So energy efficient strategies. So go ahead.
Well, I'll kind of jump in here. So really, I feel like most of the decisions that we make are usually driven by some deep functional requirement, like and a lot of what we tell a lot of our clients is that a lot of the best things you can do are not very glamorous at all. Really good installations, really good thermal barriers on your walls, a very high efficiency air conditioning system, water sense plumbing fixtures, and Energy Star appliances. These are all typical things that we do. We like engineered wood products a lot more because they're straighter, stronger, and they use less of heartwood. They use more wood pieces, and we like the fact that they can make a lot more use of wood. As long as you look out for your formaldehyde, make sure you get formaldehyde-free glues. So that's something that we spec in pretty much every project unless there's some reason we can't do that. But typically it's much better. And I just want to emphasize the metal, most exterior woods, we like to pick exterior woods from the southeast region. Cypress is one of our favorites. It's sometimes hard to get cypress and it'll mildew a little bit. So we have to be a little bit selective about when we can use it or not, depending on what kind of stain. So we'll typically only try and work with North American woods, specifically because even though they're not always FSC certified, most North American woods are going to be generally more reliable to be following sustainable practices than woods that we import from Brazil or other parts of the world or Africa. So we're very concerned about where our materials come from. And one example of that is the decking material outside is a product called Thermarie, and it is a North American hardwood that's been heat treated that allows it to have a lot of longevity, even for a wood that is not rot resistant. So they're essentially, I forgot what the species of the wood is that we put outside. I think it was an ash, but it was an ash which you would never ever use outside. But because it's gone through this heat treatment, it actually became a lot more rot resistant, and it's really beautiful. So we're able to use a North American wood outside because of this technology that's been applied to it. So those are a handful of things. The glass, we always want to get a good glass for glazing. It shows up in a lot of different ways, shading around our windows to avoid heat gain. And one of the things I want to emphasize is there have been a few reports out, and Australia recently has taken on a new policy with respect to, I think Sydney in particular has taken on a policy with respect to energy efficiency, where they're incentivizing most new houses to have a white or a high albedo roof to throw heat back away from their buildings to avoid the heat island effect. And this is one of the most basic, simple things you can do, is put a highly reflective material on your house, something that's white or light colored. And that's so important in our climate because it's so hot here that the more we can not absorb heat and hold on to it, and the more we can reflect it back into the atmosphere, the more we're helping all of our community to reduce heat gain.
And one thing I want to add to that, when you were talking about the detail of how the siding was put on, you mentioned the gap that's left between the aluminum and the waterproofing to create kind of a ventilation layer. When it goes up to the roof plane, you would see on the detail that gap actually gets bigger to account for, okay, this is a roof now. This is really getting beat down by sun. And so there's a bigger ventilation gap in there that's helping keep the house as cool as possible. So I just thought that was worth mentioning.
Well, that kind of leads to this next one. Was there an integrated gutter on the aluminum roof, the siding detail, or does the rain simply run down? The rain screens?
We let the rain go out to the ground. We have a big debate on most of our projects about gutters, because gutters are a maintenance item and it's really just displacing a problem. Water falling off your house is sometimes easier to address when it's down on the ground than water that you're collecting up at the top of your house that you still have to figure out where you're going to put it. And if you bring it down in concentrated loads like through downspouts, it'll create an erosion area. So you still have a maintenance issue, but you also have a maintenance issue at the top of the ladder. And if anybody's as clumsy as I am, they're more likely to kill themselves cleaning those gutters than cleaning the area around their house where all the water evenly fell around the edge of their house. So
Were those pronounced window surrounds single pieces of thick aluminum?
essentially they were multiple pieces that were formed. I think in some cases they were broken into shape, and then once we got to the last joint, it was welded. I forgot exactly how they made them, but we usually try and configure it as if it's all out of one piece.
Yeah, if I remember, they all had one seam. It was like a strip, and they molded into a square, and then there's one seam in each.
They're pretty beautiful, actually. And this is one of the things that we like the most about our projects, is by solving all these complicated problems. We never quite know what the design is going to look like until the end. And we sort of love it looking like something that we haven't seen before.
Was the client's art collection factored into the design in any way?
I have something. on.
Yes, go.
You probably know more, but the client had this amazing neon. So he has a great neon art piece that's out at the pool that you could see in the photos, but the water closet in the master bathroom has this amazing neon art piece in there. And it's just like a dark closet with no windows. So it's when it's really dark and he turns that art piece on, it's pretty great. I don't know if that got caught in the virtual tour, but
I'm not sure. So yes, it was. We spoke about art and just maintaining lots of walls for the different art pieces. In the end, we didn't, it was never, the placement of the art was not something we were going to do. It was something he was planning on doing with his interior designer. And I think it worked for the most part. And I will say one of the curious aspects though, is there's one very large painting on a not so large wall, which I think is a pretty unique way of looking at art. And so, but that was a real deliberate placement of that piece. But yes, yes, we knew it was going to be in the house in different places, but we never placed it individually in the design.
You'll have impervious cover issues with permitting.
No, because we stayed under impervious cover by a hair. Just it was really, as you see, there's a lot of cover on this house, and we were really close, but we're under impervious cover.
when you see the strips in a driveway, it usually indicates that we're fighting for every square foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I may have done that before as well.
Yeah. Every inch that can be covered is covered, essentially.
Let's see, there's still a couple more, but also from my mom. She loves you. Again.
I love her too. I tell her hello.
Let's get her on. Let's get her on Zoom.
Okay, sorry, there was another question. Let me check. I feel like I missed one. I think you sort of answered this. Beautiful glazed wall and pool terrace. Was the wood pool coping difficult to detail? And what was the pool deck wood species? I'm assuming that was the thermary.
That was the thermary, and yes, the pool detail, how the deck comes right to the edge of the pool, that was hard to detail.
Is it thermary right there at the edge?
It is thermary, yeah.
Oh,
It's one of their thermary. I only know of 2 manufacturers that make that heat treated wood, thermary, which is an American company, and Kebony, which I think is Norwegian. And as much as we love European products, if we don't have to get a boat to bring it all the way across the Atlantic to get here, we're happier with that. So
we have 1 minute left. Is there anything you would want to say? Just like, is there any of your favorite parts? Any of that you want to talk about?
I love the metal siding. We have continued to work with mill finish aluminum on multiple projects because it is such a beautiful and moody material. And we look at different ways of applying it. And it's one of the more magical materials we've used. Now, I'm not a huge fan of concrete and metal in general anymore because they do have a lot of carbon footprint associated with them, carbon in particular. So we're real conscious of that. We try and do as many pier and beam projects. But if we are going to use a metal, I've started to really love aluminum for all the qualities all the assets it brings to a building versus like your cooking pans or your, it's actually a toxic metal. So if we can keep it away from individual ingestible use, great. But for a house where it can do a lot of good work, it's a good thing.
All right, well, I guess that concludes our day. So I guess everyone please come back tomorrow, or sorry, on Sunday at 11:30 to see Matt Ficus Architecture. And thank you, David and Ray. Oh, there's a question. Is that a bocce court? Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. And commenters.
Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the tour. It's awesome this year, like every year. Aye.
Very good.